Now, the other reason that GM did it, and you'll see this on the internet, people will say, well, the only reason they did that was for emissions purposes. Well, I have a different viewpoint on emissions than most people.
Right.
I think emissions requirements are the greatest thing that's ever happened to the automotive world in the past 30 years.
Oh, okay. Okay, I like this.
So how else would we have the fantastic
Performance that we have.
ECMs, sensors, O2 full closed loop O2 capability,
Right.
all of these wonderful systems
Came from the demand
the
to
emissions
make them
requirements.
more emission efficient.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with not with
Exactly.
having good emissions? There's nothing wrong with that.
So hence why you because I was going to ask the question why you put the O2 or I mean the cats on your car.
So
you certainly didn't have to.
I didn't have to, but for me it did two things. One, it really quieted down the car without losing performance.
Okay, because Chevrolet engineered it
They
that
engineered
way.
all that
They
stuff.
engineered
And
it that
again, I
way.
was given some data that I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Flow.
Horsepower data.
Horsepower data.
Real.
Yeah, cats don't really hurt
don't.
power. They don't.
No.
No.
Modern
The
supercharged cars.
The old days of pellet converters, yes, they were horrible.
Different deal.
But these are monoliths.
Correct.
Yeah.
So a whole different animal. So I mean, I love having my wife drive along with me in the car, but she never liked driving in it for a long time because she gets out and she smells like hydrocarbons.
gasoline.
Yeah.
Right.
That's gone. That doesn't exist any longer in the car. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
But overall, emissions have done so much for the performance hobby that we don't even think about most of the time.
Yeah.
Because that's what's driven all these systems.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP. I'm Jeff Smith. This is my car buddy Cam Benty and car builder Steve Strope, and we're going to tell you some stories.
Welcome to another episode of Car Guy Confessions with Jeff Smith. I'm Jeff Smith. This is Steve Strope.
I am.
We have a special guest star here, Carl Casanova. But we want to
Special is
first
right. Yeah, special.
special, very
you're
special. I want to thank our sponsor, arp-bolts.com. Go check them out. It's I just put a small block together with a set of head bolts, and the whole time I'm thinking, yes, I don't have to worry about pulling threads. Isn't life wonderful? So let's just dive right in. So we have lots to talk about. So
We've been talking a lot on the phone the past couple
we
of
have,
weeks.
so we'll have to make sure and cover all of those things. So the time will go fast. Believe me, it will go fast. So let's start with the Camaro. So let's set this up. 68.
Yes.
68 Camaro LS motor was originally an LS1, wasn't it?
Well, it was originally a 327 two-barrel powered car.
Back in the day, yes. Okay, and then you transformed it with a T56, right?
LS1 T56.
Yep, and a 12-bolt.
And it's actually kind of unique. It's a 12-bolt full floater rear
Full
end. One
floater.
of the only ones that I've ever seen.
Ooh,
So we can tell a little story about
we may
that
have to
too.
talk about that.
Yeah.
So, and it was an early pro touring car, right?
So
now, were you building that before we came up with the term, or was that about commensurate?
I think it was kind of parallel.
Yeah. Because a lot of people were building cars like that.
Well, I started building the car not knowing the term, but just knowing that I wanted it to do more than just go straight.
Exactly.
But back when so I've had the car for 40 years. This was my high school car.
I didn't know that.
I drove it to my prom.
Wow, very cool.
All kinds of things with the car.
So there's history with this car.
If that car could tell stories, it'd be even a whole other podcast. So super.
I know nothing.
That might be a different rating on that one.
Another take on that same story.
Yeah, true.
So when I started rebuilding the car after college, the internet wasn't real popular. Then it just started.
Right.
There wasn't a whole lot of really good sources for solid information on how to do it. So you're kind of stumbling through a lot of that. I'll do the Goldstrin mod and I'll do a couple other things. But you didn't really know what you were doing.
Right.
I was fortunate that Dick Goldstrin wasn't that far away. His old shop, he's no longer around. That shop is closed, unfortunately. But just a wealth of information kind of pointed me in the right direction. Early mentor toward trying to build a car.
And that modification to the upper controller mounting point actually came from, I think, didn't that come from Donahue's and Penske with the early Trans Am cars?
I think that was actually Goldstrin's. I think
Goldstrin's idea,
Dick's idea
that he gave to them. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So he gave some pointers on how to set up the car and
Right.
such. But as time progressed, through my career, I was dealing with a lot of different automotive aftermarket companies, and I was dealing with Magnuson, so Magnuson superchargers.
Okay.
And I always loved sitting down with Jerry Magnuson because that guy was in education.
He was.
And he said,
guy.
Carl, you got to change. You got to put an LS in that car, and you got to put a supercharger, and eventually I finally did. And it was one of there's been 3 or 4 things in the car that have made it truly transformative. And that was it. That really changed the dynamic of the car into something where I could really drive it hard. But at the same time, if I just want to drive across the country, I can do that.
Right. And that evolved into developing it for one lap.
So had not heard of one lap until I talked a lot with James Shipka.
Okay.
So James Shipka back in the late 2000s built the one lap Camaro.
He built the one lap Camaro, right? Exactly.
Which even by today's standards is
sophisticated,
an awesome car.
Yes,
it's one of the greatest cars. I'm super fortunate I was able to drive with James on one lap and learn a lot about one lap. But halfway through it, my father got sick. I had to come home and deal with his end of life. But got hooked.
Yeah.
And was able to take some of the ideas that I had as far as I'm much more the reliability guy than the ultimate performance guy. Right. And that's what one lap is.
It's really about reliability.
Right.
Well, let's pause there for a second and define what one lap is, because there may be some readers or viewers that don't understand what that is.
Sure. So a lot of people are familiar with drag week.
Right.
Which is you drag race during the day, and then you have a drive to your track the next day.
Pack your stuff up and you head to the next track.
Head to the next track.
And what you don't want to do is brake in between.
You don't want to brake.
Because it puts you behind.
So drag week was based on one lap.
Yes.
So one lap is you start and finish at the Tire Rack of America headquarters in South Bend, Indiana. And you do track events during the day. You do performance events during the day.
Every day.
Every day. You do this for a week.
Yeah.
So it ends up being usually like 19 to 20 different performance events. You'll be doing autocross, road course. Right. One year they even had dirt track you had to go and do.
Really?
Which I would love. If
really?
Brock ever bought that back, I'm in.
That sounds crazy. Yeah.
So you would do basically time trials during the day. You could even have a drag race put at the end of the day. It's always mixed up.
Right.
And you go to different places every year. But then you usually have like a 500 to 700 mile transit stage that night to get you to the next track.
Serious. I mean, we're talking now sleep deprivation, right?
Towards the end of the week, it's sleep management. and you have to have your co-driver that you can trust because and then it becomes part of the logistics. I mean, you come off track, you're just full of adrenaline. So you're driving the first leg, the other guy gets a couple hours of sleep, and then you swap.
Yeah. Right. And then he drives it through the night to get you to the next track.
Usually you drive through a full tank of gas or until you need to have a bio break.
Right.
But there has to be some sleep in the car because if you're lucky, you get 4 to 5 hours a night, maybe in a bed.
And that sounds like a lot, but you're not in a bed rather than just 4 or 5 hours in the car.
Right. We're in the car typically on transit stages are usually 6 to 7 hours.
Okay.
But if you've got a big one that's 700 miles, you're in the car 10, 11 hours.
Yeah.
So you're pulling into the hotel at 2 in the morning,
and you're going to get up at 6, right?
And you got to be at the track by 7 so you can walk it and get a feel for things. Sure. So you'll find people kind of in their fetal position sleeping next to the car as the week goes on.
So as you said, it's really as much about durability because if the car won't survive, you're not going to win. You can't possibly win.
Right, and even just missing or DNFing one event is a killer.
Is a killer.
So it's interesting after doing enough of them, you see cars come in, and these cars are really high strung.
Right.
And you go,
not going to survive.
They're not going to survive. Right. They get 1 or 2 events and they're gone.
And they're gone. And they don't come back.
And they don't come back. So it's first and foremost it's a reliability marathon.
Right. And I would take a certain amount of balance between reliability, but you still have to have the performance if you're going to have a chance to win.
And you got to have at least a reasonably good pedigree for driving the car. Because many of these tracks you've never been to before.
Okay.
The guys that are really good, I mean, these guys are well established. They have a fantastic racing background. They've been to many of these places before. They're driving supercars. I mean, you got guys like Lee Keen. He's a factory Porsche driver. These guys are studs when they're behind the wheel. Where else in the world? It's like playing golf with Tiger Woods. And those, guys of that level because they're coming out to race. race, and
I hadn't thought of that before, but you're right. I get to race against those guys.
You're racing against really
really talented drivers.
Right. Like we had Andy Pilgrim.
Really?
Yeah. Andy, a couple years ago, it was Andy Pilgrim was driving a brand new BMW M4.
Okay.
Fantastic car. And we and his co-driver, my co-driver, we all just kind of got along together. We were doing a lot of this on the overall score, so it was just a ton of fun when you meet guys like that. And
now, is because you have an older car, is there a classic category for your car, or do you compete against the late model cars?
So it's really two things. So first, there is the overall. So everybody gets stacked into this big overall.
Right.
The other one is you do have classifications. So since it's a 68 Camaro, it falls into the vintage category.
Vintage category.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the current rules is 1984 and prior.
Okay.
Foreign or domestic. So now it's opened it up to a lot of the BMW M cars and such. So it's become much more competitive, which is a good thing because there weren't enough cars in it before.
Okay.
But the big boy classes, you're talking $50,000 and above, 3.6 liters and above. I mean, you're talking the cars that do really well are going to be like Z06 Corvettes, Nissan GTRs. But these,
those are serious cars. Yeah,
there's a reason why they're called Godzilla because it's a serious piece of equipment. Yeah, but just a lot of great.
So how many of these have you done with the Camaro?
I've done three with this car and the one with James Shipka.
And with Shipka.
Yeah.
So what was the craziest time?
So
it has to be like an episode, right?
There ends up being lots of them. So there was one time we were driving north toward Tulsa, and we just finished up drag racing. And I don't do drag racing. I've drag raced that car on one lap twice in the past 30 years.
Okay.
That's it. So we did fairly well driving north toward Tulsa, and it's a stunning, it's just a beautiful day. That's one of the nicest things about one lap is you get to go on some routes that are just beautiful. They're kind of off the beaten path. Sun's going down, beautiful sunset. It's like, man, this is great. We're making good time. We're actually going to get some sleep tonight. And no. And it was a bang.
Ooh.
Big bang.
Oh.
All of a sudden, we start seeing rain. Rain's coming.
Okay.
And now we're looking it up on our phones. Like, it's not just rain. It's
red.
It's
red.
So
that's not good.
So we stopped. We put Rain-X on the windshield. You clean the windshield on the car 5-6 times a day at least because of the bugs and everything.
Right.
So we get to Tulsa, and it's pouring. But for some reason, the Rain-X screwed up the window. The windshield wipers wouldn't work right. They're just jumping and bouncing. It was off. You couldn't drive. So we took 5 minutes, pulled into a hotel, got out some brake cleaner, wiped it, trying to get rid of the Rain-X on the windshield.
The silicone on the windshield,
Right. But it's pouring rain, so it's super damp and wet.
Right. So even it's diluting it, and it's not working.
Yeah, even under the hotel
And the
entry.
brake clean ate the rubber on your wiper blades.
It still worked better than having the Rain-X on there.
Something must be wrong because I've driven across country a ton of times with Rain-X and it works like a truck.
With the windshield wipers.
No,
you don't. You just don't use them. Yeah, that's what I've always. I use Rain-X on Power Tour because I didn't have windshield wipers on my car.
So we were going a lot of speed changes because the rain was getting,
serious,
really serious.
Yeah.
So we managed to get back.
It does that in the Midwest.
It does that, yeah. So we get back on the highway, and all of a sudden it just stops. All the traffic just stops, and it hadn't been just a couple minutes before then that a tornado first paralleled the frontage road and then went across the highway. So they closed the freeway and said, "Okay, you guys now got to exit the freeway off of this exit." And then get onto the frontage road.
Is that because a tornado passed it, but no damage was done? Or
no, they put us on the frontage road where the tornado came through. There's crap everywhere. But before we even got off
Hey, we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP-bolts.com. We got a fantastic little backdrop here. They make an outstanding series of bolts, almost anything you would need for engines, chassis, things like that. In fact, we were at lunch today, and a guy asked you about the bolt on the back of your shirt, and and I said, well, it's really about a head bolt. They neck the stem down of the bolt on a small block Chevy head bolt, so that the clamp load is even across 3 different head bolt lengths on a small block Chevy. And, so that's the kind of technology that you get out of ARP. And we've all got stories on all that stuff.
Well, for a translation of what he said, call arpbolts.com.
but the message is that you can't get any better than that.
No, you cannot.
There you go.
Nope.
Excellent.
And then just check them out at arp-bolts.com. We'd like to thank our friends at inthegaragemedia.com. They have 3 fantastic magazines. They've got Classic Truck Performance, they have Modern Rotting, and my favorite, All Chevy Performance with Nick, my buddy Nick, who's the editor.
Biased.
So,
Correct.
yes, of course.
Yes.
But they're doing print media, which is, of course, our favorite. So
In color and
magazine.
everything.
in color and everything, and you can get your car on the cover of one of those books, which is
Right.
a fun
that's a
deal.
lot.
Great tech.
Great
Written
tech.
by you
know,
and others
not always
that are
written by me, but yeah. Yeah.
Not always written by me.
That's right.
Just
So
pick it
check
up and
them out
read it.
at inthegaragemedia.com, and they're our friends, and they will thank you.
But before we even get a chance to get off the freeway, we're on the off ramp. Okay. And there's now a river
Oh, yeah.
going across this exit. And there's a dually truck in front of us, and the water is well over the center of the wheel on the dually truck.
Uh-oh.
And
That's not
there's
good.
hundreds of cars behind us. We're stuck.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
my co-driver, John, he was driving the car then,
Yeah.
and he's starting to panic. He goes, what should I do? What should I do? And this is all part of the car preparation.
Yeah.
I'm doing the mental gymnastics now going, what is that height? What is going to be flooded? Is the car going to make it through?
Right. And will it carry
Is
us
the air
off?
cleaner higher than the sentence?
Exactly.
Well,
Well, yep. So I'm like, just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we plowed through that thing. And the next day when we opened up the hood and started looking underneath the car, it had come all the way up to the to the doors.
Wow.
And fortunately, no water came in the car, but that thing got
Wow.
hammered. It got soaked.
Wow. Yeah.
But then you're driving along the frontage road. I mean, the hotel. There's hotels, industrial buildings. It's all just wiped out.
Really?
Yeah.
So
You can
debris everywhere?
Debris everywhere.
You're
you
lucky
could-
you didn't tear your tires up.
Fortunately, on the
well, that's what the water was for. See, it
washed everything away.
Watch all that debris away.
Sorry about that. Now remember, everybody. Now that we're going to pause and make fun of me, my right eye doesn't work, so this microphone doesn't exist in my line of vision. I want to hide right now. Well, the funny thing I was saying, damn it, was that all the rainwater was there to wash all the debris away. Continue, Carl. Back over to Carl.
Back over to Carl.
Don't look at me. That's right. Way over there. Don't look at me. Don't look behind the
And then how far were you from where you needed to go?
We still had another couple hundred miles to
Oh,
go.
jeez. So how far did you have to go on the frontage road to get back on the freeway?
It only ended up being a couple 2 or 3 miles before they
okay.
put you back
Okay.
on again.
Yeah.
But as we're driving by, we're seeing these hotels and industrial buildings and trailer parks with
which are tornado magnets.
Right.
Yes.
So
prerequisite.
front 50 feet of the building's fine, and then there's this gap.
Oh, yeah.
Where it just went through and just tore it
Well,
up.
and most probably know by now, but I've moved from Southern California, from our undisclosed location here, to Iowa, and got back there and immediately was faced with in the middle of March, which was very bizarre, a tornado. And
That's
it was
not
like,
tornado time.
No,
for
it
you
was
guys.
not at all, but it was unreasonably hot.
Yeah.
And that's what caused it. And I was out in my shop, and my son comes running out, and he's a big guy, so he doesn't run. And he's running out, and I'm going, somebody's hurt, right? And he goes, close the shop up right now. We got a tornado. It's coming at us. Okay, so close the shop up real quick, which really was dumb because
Gotta open the windows.
yes, but
Depressurize.
just wasn't thinking. And
Close
so
it
I'm
all
walking.
up.
There's about 50 feet from. No, it's more like 75 feet or 100 feet from my shop to my house, and we can see it. Not the tornado, but the clouds just got super black, and it literally formed
spinning.
over our house. And it was turning this direction, and the air at the bottom where we were was going the other way. It was bizarre. And then it hit Winterset, which was about 8 miles from my house as a crow flies, and 6 people got killed. So it was all my friends here were saying, so are you going to move back? And it's like, no, I'm just trading one natural disaster for another.
You get tornado weather, we got earthquake weather.
Yeah, exactly. But nevertheless, it's scary, And,
absolutely. Because when I co-drove with James, I was super fortunate that James let me co-drive with him one year. Mary Posey was his normal co-driver. She couldn't make it, so I was able to step in for half of it. But it's one of the things, you're like, see that sky over there?
Yeah, and when it turns...
And speed up.
Yeah. When it turns green,
yeah.
That's bad. That's very, very bad. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, oh boy. Yeah. But that's that's the Midwest, right?
Yep.
And we hit that on Power Tour one year.
Yeah, we had
going through Kansas.
The one when we started at the Grand Ole Opry and came back out this way.
Oh, okay.
And we were in, where were we? Well, it happened before we went into Louisiana, but that night in Louisiana, it poured, and then we went to another place, which I think was Texas, and there was tornado warnings, and it started hailing. I'm like, oh, everyone's paint job's
hail is the
love
worst.
this.
Hail is the worst.
And I remember we were at the cruise stop, and everything kind of ended early. Everybody bailed to their hotels.
Right.
And then the parking lot just started filling up with water, and the hail was coming down.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting close enough to my microphone.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be a professional, actually.
Yeah,
and
I think there's a product that needs to be developed. My son's girlfriend said, I want to wrap my car in bubble wrap, for the hail that was supposed to be coming. Right. And it was like,
sure,
I'll bet you could build a car cover that would do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised no one's done
the
that.
hail repellent.
Hail resistant.
Hail resistant.
Hail resistant, just to give him a chance, right?
Oh, yeah, it's called the garage. Good.
Well, yes.
The voice from
see, the problem is her car has to sit outside because all the hot rods are in the garage. Oh, so anyway,
good to know you all got priorities.
Because, and you're right to open up the windows, because what happens is when the tornado comes by, very low pressure, and the house explodes from the pressure on the inside. And that's exactly what happened. Those people got killed. The house was gone.
Up.
It was gone.
Wow.
It was completely gone. So that's the kind of stuff you guys are looking at on one lap,
right?
Occasionally,
right.
I mean, there's the potential for that.
Well, there's potential.
And it's a week-long deal, right?
It's Saturday, basically like a Saturday to Saturday.
Saturday to Saturday, yeah.
And it usually finishes the Saturday before Mother's Day. So
wonderful.
we're trying to wrap up and get home because we've been gone for a while, and the wife's,
yeah.
But it's just really something that if you're a gearhead and you love driving cars, that's the event to go to.
Yeah.
So much fun.
With an emphasis on the durability. So hence, when we started talking about your car, this last time around we were talking about it, you were in the midst of converting it to something a bit more durable.
So there's a couple things I've done with the car. The car's always kind of in a state of flux. It's my little project that I get to tinker with.
It's going to always evolve, right?
So, and it was interesting because I was having the conversation with a mutual friend, Mark Stilo, and he was talking about, I really want to calm down some of my cars because he deals with race cars all day long.
Right.
So he wants something that's a little, because I was doing
and still be fast.
Still be fast.
Right.
And I had already started kind of thinking about the same thing because last September I drove the car on the Good Guys Road Tour, and that was 5,500 miles. And although the car, for what it was fairly quiet for the exhaust it had on it, I drove from Dallas to Los Angeles almost straight through. Stopped for a couple, 2 or 3 hours to sleep, and then kept on going. It wears on you after a while.
It does.
So it was like, okay, how can I get the best of all worlds? I want it to be durable. I want it to be fast. I want it to be quieter. I want to bring down the noise pressure in the car.
The interior noise.
The interior noise of the car. So after having discussions with Mark, and Mark says, hey, you need to go talk to this other guy who works for GM. He's got a lot of good data. That's what's nice about, guys like you who have knowledge, insider knowledge. We get good data.
Yeah.
And they're like, just do this, and basically, from the data we were, was given, put catalytic converters on the car. So now the car has all 4 2021 ZL1 Camaro catalytic converters.
Okay.
It has Gen 5 LS7 tubular tri-Y manifolds.
Okay.
So it's a it's a shorty header.
And the reason for that is because they've done the $1 million worth of testing to make sure they're not going to crack and break and fall off and all that crazy stuff.
I won't mention the manufacturer, but I've blown out the back end of now 4 mufflers in the car.
Okay.
I've busted multiple different manufacturers' X pipes in the car. All with flex joints, fully mounted, all supported. Supercharging
shouldn't have done it.
It shouldn't have done it, but supercharging is hard on cars. Because cars is supercharged.
Because you're talking about a lot of heat and
a lot
pressure.
of heat, and you're pushing it hard on track, and so it's hard on things. So I tried to take the approach of what can I do from an OE standpoint, and after talking to these guys, it's like, okay, I'm not concerned about it because without good data, you don't know. You're listening to things that very popular out there, but is that really the right thing?
Exactly.
So took that approach, redid some other things in the car. Basically, I fully rebuilt the drivetrain. It started on that drive back from Dallas. I blew the pilot bearing out in the car.
Ooh.
And managed to be able to get the car home. So blowing out the pilot bearing turned into a full soup to nuts rebuild of the entire drivetrain of the car.
Because when the pilot bearing goes out, not a bushing, but a bearing, that means you were misaligned.
It was definitely misaligned.
Yeah.
So I bought it when I put all that together. It was a brand new GM block. It was a brand new GM bell housing. It was everything. But I didn't check the alignment. I'm thinking it's all brand new parts. It should be fine.
Exactly. You shouldn't have to.
I mean, you're talking, if it's got to be 5,000 TIR on the bore,
we're within spec.
You should be within spec.
Right.
And the flatness, I mean, shouldn't even be a concern.
Yeah, parallelism to the bell housing mount.
Right. Yeah. So
silly you.
That's exactly right, Steve. Silly me.
But also, it's a situation where you've really pushed it hard.
Yeah.
And that was after how many years?
So it had 5 years on it.
5 years.
And a lot of track time.
Yeah.
So it actually held up better than I expected because, and you're exactly right, Steve. What's that assume thing? How does that go?
Yeah.
So I assumed, but after getting it out of the car and doing a physical check, it was within spec on TIR.
Okay.
So it was within 5. But what they really want for that parallelism, the transmission again, which is the harder one, which most people don't do.
Most people don't even think to look at.
Right.
Because they just assume
that
it's parallel.
It's supposed to be within 2000s TIR.
Okay.
For normal driving and 1 thou for high performance driving. So if you're going to be pushing hard on track, high RPM.
So near perfect.
Near perfect. It was 11 thousandths out.
Yikes. Which is at 1 is 11 times the spec.
Well, it's 11 times the spec, but it's also in a lever arm.
Yeah.
Because it's this far
that
away.
Far
11 thousandths out, it's really
so
tweaked.
It's just taking the input shaft and just going.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So that's why it failed. So I took the not easy road, which would have been shims, and I actually put the whole bell housing on a mill and milled the bell housing.
Really?
And it took me like 5 or 6 setups of that, taking just a little bit at a time here and there. Yeah. Finally got it to where it needs to be because one of the things about reliability is what if?
Right.
I don't think I'm ever going to have to take the transmission out on 1 lap. But if I do, I don't want to have a bunch dozen shims trying to remember where they go.
Going to fall out when you pull the bell housing off.
In the middle of the night on the side of the road, having to do something.
Right. Which is exactly where it will happen.
Yeah, that's when it's that's exactly where and when it's.
I ran into a similar situation. Was actually doing one of our tech videos with Cam, and was going to do a bell housing, and it turned into the most difficult video that we did.
Right.
Because halfway through, I said, well, here, we just threw it up in and we'll check parallelism. And had this bell housing on a small block Chevy, pulled it off, stuck it on this LS motor, and all of a sudden it was 10 thousandths out. Went back to the small block. It's perfect.
Right.
WTF.
The block.
What? The block is off that much?
Yeah.
Then I started looking very closely, and of course it was installer error. What I did on the LS motor was put an aftermarket pan on it. And when I mounted the pan, because there are no dowels, right?
Right.
So the pan was all of a sudden 10,000 because the bottom of the pan on
back.
OE is a bolt connection for the bell housing. I don't use them because the bell housing I was using didn't have them, so it didn't dawn on me that would be an issue. But what I was doing was taking the back of the bell housing and going like that with it.
Right.
And there was my parallelism that was out, so I just did the quickie deal and just took a die grinder to the back of the pan, and that fixed it. But probably wasn't the best solution. The best solution would be to relocate the pan forward, but I had to finish the video. So I said, Cam, come back tomorrow. And so there's a little behind the scenes of how we cheated it, but it was right. And then once I milled it down with a file, for about an hour.
Right.
Then it was okay. And because I wanted to make sure I had a gap, because I wasn't going to bolt it to the pan at the bottom.
Right.
But then it was fixed.
Right.
Yeah. But
right.
had I tried to run it without checking it, it would have done exactly what you did. And so even more so that at 11 times the spec,
right.
it lasted all those years.
It still lasted quite
amazing.
a long time.
That's amazing.
And it had been acting up for 3 years.
Okay.
Because after racing, and we did drag racing on one lap in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
And again, I don't do drag racing all that often.
Mm-hmm.
So ran the quarter, and afterward it was like the clutch just didn't feel right.
Yep.
I couldn't put my finger on it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just like one of those things, like it just doesn't feel
there's something
right.
not right here.
There's something not right. I mean, it still worked fine. Car
Sure.
drove okay. It was just like,
But it felt like gritty.
No, not at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
Didn't even know.
Mine did that.
Okay.
Mine did that. It felt gritty, and it took a long time to figure out what it was, and it was again out of spec. Yeah. Wow. So, but that's cool. And that really shows just the level of development you have to have that car survive that kind of abuse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not making the car like a 10/10ths car where it's,
right.
I could put another 100 horsepower in the car. I could put a lot of other, really make it a high strung machine, but
Mm-hmm.
then it's not something I can just jump in and go wherever I want to with
Right.
it.
Right.
I really
right.
wanted to be a dual purpose kind of a car.
Yeah.
I would say G Machine or Restomod. Yeah. Or, can I say Restomod,
No.
Steve? No?
We're going to bleep that out, actually.
How about Pro Touring? Can I say that?
Touring,
All right.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
That is the correct wordage that you may use.
But that and still probably a lot of fun. Now, did you notice a power difference? Because you feel a power difference by those more durability changes that you did to the car?
Well, so there's really only been 2 LS engines in the car. There was the LS1, and then I went up to an LS6, which is still basically the same.
Yeah.
But better set of heads, a little bit more boost. So
Right.
it was much faster with the second engine.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, especially for my driving abilities, the car has plenty of power.
Mm-hmm.
It's the nut behind the wheel that's the limiting factor in the car.
Exactly.
So it's the any money that I put into the car is really much better spent on me going
Learning how to be a better driver.
Yeah, we did Bondurant not too long ago. I've been considering doing another class someplace because you learn so much and being able to go to those. And I've been super fortunate. There's a local group that goes to Willow Springs fairly regularly, and I'm kind of the driving instructor for the beginner guys. And I tell every one of them, I go, the best thing you can do as a driver is to leave your ego out there at the gate when you come in.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some guy in a shitbox Miata that is going to pass you up no matter how fast you think you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you just learn from that person, that's going to just make your learning curve so much better.
Right. Exactly. So we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP and ARP-bolts.com. And we all three build cars. We all work on this stuff. And
I tinker.
You tinker.
I tinker.
Yes, we all build.
Yeah, and you know what? It's kind of a really cool multiple purpose fastener for me because there's all the science and all the technology, which is bottomless. Trust me. Unbelievable amount of research that they put into these things.
Absolutely.
And on top of it, you get them out of the package, and they're absolutely beautiful. Which I've joked before, it's like jewelry for your car. And when
pre-oiled.
we're building when we're building a high end car, there isn't anything else going on it. It's part of the criteria for me to have them lining the engine bay, not just on the engine, everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
So you get all the strength, the durability, the reliability, and fantastic good looks.
Sure.
Kind of like Jeff here.
And without peer. Without peer.
And you know what?
Or pairs.
Without peer, there's nobody else that does what they do.
It is. So check them out at arp-bolts.com, and they can help you out. I mentioned in an earlier one with Shannon about my experience with a guy at this event where just totally embarrassed me with a Saab Sonnet, which had probably 1/4 the horsepower I had, and just drove away from me on the tight part of the portion of the course. I could run roughly similar lap times, but he would be much faster.
Right.
Yeah. And it was all, and that's when I realized it's really not about the power. it's the car and also the driver.
The driver.
More so the driver than anything else.
Right. That's like, well,
So have you ever put somebody else in the car that's faster so that you have an
Mary.
idea?
Mary Posey. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Mary drove the car quite a bit back. I mean, it was like 2010, 2011, something like that. It was like a Super Chevy Challenge.
Yeah.
And so she drove the car quite a bit then, and then she also drove it. I think she drove it at Willow Springs one time.
Okay.
But I very much enjoyed riding in the passenger seat, being able to watch her and listen to her talk, because women learn better than men. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
And
Probably because there's less ego involved.
Well, that's the thing. So I always very much enjoyed riding with Mary and learning from her, and then David, her husband.
Yeah.
Both those have been mentors.
Who's
for
also
me.
a very good driver.
Very accomplished driver.
And has a fantastic race
Lola.
car.
The Lola.
Oh, my God.
The Lola is just stunning.
We were talking about that. Weren't we talking about that today earlier?
Yeah, my friend Steve's
Lola
Lola T70.
his car, and I didn't know about it. I was at Laguna's, at Laguna for the vintage race up there, and he debuted the car. I didn't even know.
Oh, you were there that day?
Yeah.
Because I was there pitting for him that weekend.
Were you?
I didn't even see you there.
I don't know. So anyway, I'm like, I run by it, and he's standing there, and I didn't make the connection.
Right.
I didn't know that was his car.
That car's stunning.
Oh my God! What year was it? 67?
I think it's like a 65, 66, somewhere in there.
Small block car.
Yeah, but like a 500 horsepower small block car.
Yeah. But before the serious Can-Am big block stuff.
Right.
And it was just this beautiful cobalt blue
That blue
car.
is stunning.
Oh my God! And when I realized it was his car, it was like, I was like a kid in a candy store. He goes, "You want to sit in it?" I was like,
oh, that's great.
He's got photos of me in the car. I was like, dude, I'm 7 years old. This is cool.
He had been such a help to me on both the car.
He's a wonderful
and
guy.
helping me learn how to drive and all that. And I said, David, when you take that car out, call me and I will be there.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I went up, and then there's 3 or 4 other people that were there that were helping him pit. And
just a spectacular car.
Just a great.
Oh man.
And such nice people.
Yes, absolutely. So so did he help you in the development of the Camaro? Because he actually has a website for early Camaro stuff.
He does. So I learned a lot from David. And actually, my first time I ever did a track day was with John Hotchkiss. So Hotchkiss had a track day. And you remember Kevin Lee?
Yeah.
So Kevin invited me out.
Okay.
So I went out, and it was like, hey, Carl's taking the car to the track. So and David happened to be in the area or something like that. So he came in, and he rode in the car with me. And we're going down the main straight of Button Willow. And so
the front straight, right?
On the front straight, and you got that 90 degree at turn 1.
Yeah, the first turn is a hard left-hand turn.
Well, we're coming to turn 1, and that brake pedal's going all the way to the floor. I'm like, David, I got no brakes. He's like, pump it. That was my first experience on using brakes from a company that gave me something. And me being ignorant and finding out
this was going to work.
They don't work.
And it's a bad time to learn that.
It's a really bad time to learn. So I overheated the brakes. I got the power steering so hot that the top of the power steering resolver desoldered and fell off.
I think I was there.
You might have been there.
I remember that because that was a
like
two-piece housing, and they soldered the top or brazed it to the top. And I remember that because there was a puff of white smoke that came out.
That would be me.
And that was the power steering fluid going all over the inside of the engine compartment. Oh yeah,
I wrecked the tires. I did everything.
Oh man,
I did everything. I did everything wrong from a driver and a car prep standpoint. Wrong.
But there was one guy out there. It may not have been that event, but it was one just like it at a track day, who had a Chevelle, and he's out there every lap. He was out there running, and we'd break for lunch.
Yeah.
And so he'd been out there all morning running his car, and I really wasn't paying attention, but I knew he was just out there a long time. So I'd take 4 or 5 laps, come in, breathe the car, let the temperature stabilize, then go back out.
Yeah.
And he was just wow. And we broke for lunch. It was like an hour. And then he go back out, and he made 2 laps, not even 2 laps, 1 lap, and boom. The motor blew up. And so they're bringing him in on a hook, and we're talking. And I said, I noticed that you were out there like whole morning. He goes, oh, yeah, I was having a great time. I said, you got an oil cooler on this thing? He looked at me like, a what? I went, an oil cooler. He's, no. Do you have an oil temperature gauge? No. Your motor's toast.
Yeah.
It's done. And he goes, well, I probably just broke a piston or something. No, you melted it.
It's gone.
I said, once this thing completely cools down, it will not turn over. And then later it was like they're standing on a, standing on a breaker bar.
It's not going
Yeah,
anywhere.
it melted. He melted it down, just burned it up. Yep.
Yeah, those are all the things. Oil control.
Again, back to the durability. Yeah. So what have you done on the Camaro for oil control?
So I'm still wet sump.
Okay. So the art of living dangerously.
The art of living dangerously. But I went through several oil pans on the car and finally landed on. This goes back a ways. Do you remember ATS?
Yeah.
American Touring Specialist. Tyler Beauregard. He and another gentleman collaboratively developed an LS road race oil pan.
Oh, okay.
And it's fantastic.
Really?
Yeah. SpeedTech sells it now.
Okay.
So for a wet sump pan,
that's the
one.
I'll have to write that down because that's because going dry sump is ultimately what you need to do, but the complexity and the potential for it to you lose a belt or whatever is always there.
There's a lot of different things that could potentially go on there.
Right.
But it becomes one of these things is where do you stop?
Exactly. Because now all of a sudden it becomes more race car than street car.
Right.
Right.
Although there's a lot of street cars built today that have
Well,
dry sumps in them.
the LS7 had a poor man's dry sump.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So the engine itself is really not that dramatic. It's still an LS6. It's got a scat rotating assembly, forged piston. It's 10.2 to 1.
And how many miles are on that thing now?
On that engine, I think it's like 43,000, something like that on that setup.
Excellent.
There's only like 6,000 or something like that since it went through the full rebuild. And it didn't really need the full rebuild. It's just one of those things where my brain starts saying, you got to check it, you got to check it, you got to check it.
Exactly. Because it'll be one of those situations, if you don't, that's when it fails.
Right.
But, if
then the other thing's going to pop up my shoulder and said, you should have checked it.
Yeah, the little devil on his shoulder goes,
right.
You knew you should have done that. It's like it's like when my axle broke in one of the Hotchkiss deals, and I had broken axle I knew I didn't know it was cracked, but I knew I was living on borrowed time.
Right.
Just one more event, and then I'm going to change it over, and that's when the axle broke.
And that's when it broke. Yep.
So we need to talk about, because I didn't watch when we started, so I don't know where we're at, but we have not discussed VaporWorx.
No, and we should do that. Yes.
And as your locally, marketing guy, in my brain, I'm like, why the hell aren't you talking about your company?
No,
yet?
I was going to get there. But thank you. The segue was perfect, right?
Well, it kind of fits with what I wanted to do with the car.
Exactly. Yes.
Uncle Carl, what's VaporWorx?
Because again, it relates to the OEM stuff. How much of the OEM stuff can you take advantage of?
Right. So after converting the car to EFI, supercharged, LS, all that, I went out and bought an aftermarket tank because you need to have an electric fuel pump now, high pressure fuel pump. Yeah. So I went out and bought what I thought was the best setup out there. And over the next year, failed 3 fuel pumps in the car. And it basically all boiled down to where if the liquid level in the tank got below half liquid level.
Now the pump is exposed.
The pump, you turn hard, you make 1G, the fuel's going to slosh away,
sure.
and the pump becomes uncovered. And fuel is the lubricant and the coolant for the pump.
Exactly, internally and externally.
Yes.
Yeah.
So mostly internal is by far the most important.
Yes.
You got it needs to have liquid flowing through it. So I didn't trust driving the car anymore. So
which kind of defeats the purpose.
Defeats the purpose of the car. So like, okay, now I need to do some more homework. And one day saw one of Mark's builds. He had a photo, and all it was a tank and this black thing that was sitting there, black thing with a white top on. I'm like, what is that?
What is that?
So that's a modern fuel module. So the modern OEM fuel modules that come in, Gen 5 Camaro, Gen 6 Camaro, CTSV, Hellcats. Every OEM car that's made today uses an integrated fuel module.
Right.
So the integrated fuel module has an electric pump in it, but it also is so much more.
Right.
It has a built-in surge tank, so even if the fuel sloshes away, the pump still has fuel available.
Yeah, it's got a pre-pump.
Yep.
Right? Feeding the pump, so it's never without.
Right.
It's got a built-in fuel sending unit to
Yep.
send up. See, I learned something from him. See,
You too can speak technical.
I
Yes.
can. I use bolt and things. So as a builder, not as a race car owner, or in this case, it's more like they're building stuff for like Sebring or Le Mans. It's got to last and last and last. It's not going to go around for 200 miles and then you can put it on the trailer.
Right.
But as a builder, when he introduced this stuff to me, it's less with more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I can now run 1 3/8 fuel line.
Yes.
Instead of making a giant 10 and then a return.
And no returns.
And taking up room and
because
stuffing them next to hot exhaust
because
and
the factory
stuff.
figured out that wasn't going to work, right? The return style systems, because all you do is end up heating the fuel up.
So there's really kind of.
I learned that from. I just stopped myself because the car was built by another professional shop who I love.
Uh-huh.
So I'll just say we had a car that came in that another shop, the awesome shop, had built. They never had time to test the car, but the exhaust, the fuel send and return went up the trans tunnel by the 3.5 inch exhaust. And it was, we took one of the temp guns on the fuel tank.
It was probably scary.
It was running,
oh boy, yeah.
crazy.
Very hot.
So now
Which
we
is bad.
run one line that's easy to package because it's only 3/8, but at like 72, 75 PSI, you move a lot of fuel.
Sure, yeah.
Right? So when he introduced me to this, basically what I'm doing is using a fuel pump. There's a couple of different levels. The Z28 pump for your 500 horse. Then you can move to the ones that were like either LSA or the LS7, the higher output
levels.
pump.
Yeah.
These are a modular, but they're
Yeah, it's about this. We'll have to run some.
GM
we'll run some
already
photos
did
of
the
it.
billions of dollars in R&D.
Yeah, take advantage of it.
So you have a ring, and it has to be set at a certain height off the bottom of the tank. But the thing does everything. One send line, and
No filters, no regulators.
It's got
no
a
return lines,
lifetime
it's
filter
all
on the
integrated
damn
fuel
thing,
module.
right? So now I'm building a super clean underneath because I got one line that I can tuck over here safely away from any heat.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And the pump is total reliable. It's OEM reliable.
Yeah, it's going to go 100,000 miles. Yeah,
Easy.
or more.
And I can get it from Rock Auto. It's an AC Delco part number.
Right.
So heaven forbid I am somewhere and something happens to it, I can go to a GM place or I can overnight it from Rock Auto to the hotel. It's a snap ring. The piece goes in.
Yep.
But it works hand in hand with your unit.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That talks to the engine ECU or they communicate.
It can if necessary, but in most cases it doesn't need to.
Right.
So what the way the modern systems work is you've got the ECM, and it talks to a fuel computer. So they're talking back and forth over a CAN bus.
And it's telling the fuel pump how much to deliver.
Much pressure.
Right. It commands the pressure.
So now we don't need a return.
Yeah.
Right, because you turn the pump into a variable speed pump.
So is it kind of fun to say it's like a slot car trigger?
Pretty much.
It's sending
It's
less,
essentially,
more,
right,
less, more. It's sending
They're
what's
doing
needed.
it by PWM.
So
pulse
don't
width
go off the
modulation.
damn track with the full throttle.
Well, because when you're putting down the road in sixth gear, you're sipping fuel, so it has to maintain the pressure, but it's pulsing it where it's only using maybe 20% of the.
So I just had this discussion with a gentleman today. He's building a Hellcat. He has a Hellcrate engine. And he wanted to put a dual 525 liter per hour pumps on a full return system, and
you're just rocketing fuel up, heating it, and bringing it back. Yeah.
That same pump is used in the Demon, but it's not run that way.
It doesn't run that way.
Right.
Yeah.
They put it. You turn the pump into a variable speed, and you just change the speed of the pump to match the targeted fuel pressure.
Right. To whatever you need. Right.
Every OEM does it this way.
Yep.
So then there's really two reasons. One, you've got to slow down these pumps that are 800 horsepower capable.
Because they're mini fire hoses when they run wide open.
And you're generating a tremendous amount of heat.
Yep.
So the heat in the fuel load is bad.
Yep. Because it heats the fuel up.
Correct. Because vapor lock doesn't really happen forward of an electric pump anymore.
Right.
When you're producing 60 PSI,
it's not going to vapor
It's not
lock.
boiling.
It's not going to boil.
Where it does boil, and you see this on Power Tour all the time.
All the time.
Is
I actually started calling it the vapor lock tour.
The vapor lock tour, because what happens is this fuel gets so hot in the tank, and now it's trying to move into the pump. Now it's under less pressure.
Right.
Lower the pressure, you lower the boiling point.
Boil point.
So it's vaporizing as it's going
as it's going in.
Pump.
I got a great example of that situation. It was a number of years ago. A friend of mine, a guy that I'd met on the tour, had built this twin turbocharged 6-liter little Chevy 2. And it was really a nice little car, except for the way they mounted the pump.
Right.
And what he did was, so it had, what was the Chevy 2 have for a gas tank? 16 gallons?
Yeah.
66 Chevy 2?
Yeah.
stock tank. He mini tubbed it a little bit, so with big tires. We still had the stock tank in it, but he put an A1000 Aeromotive, and it wasn't the fault of the pump at all.
No,
it wasn't the pump's fault at all.
pump.
But he mounted it this far above the tank.
No, that's even
so
worse.
now you have this negative. You have a line that's got to suck, right? It's got to pull. It's got to do negative pressure here to get it to climb the steel. And so what he would do, and then when he would, I did the math on it. I've forgotten the numbers, but he said it would always lock the pump up after we got below a quarter of a tank, and then. And I said, so how would you get down the road then? He goes, well, first we just tried to put ice on it to cool it down enough so it would work. Because when it would lock up, it got so hot that the clearances went away and it would just lock up.
Yep.
And then as soon as it cooled down, the pump would come back. And he said, but that took too long. So I said, so what was the other solution? He said, you ready for this?
No.
He said, I told this to Brett Clow, who is the tech guy at Aeromotive, and he about had an aneurysm when I told him this. He said, oh, we just took a bottle of nitrous and hit it. Nitrous comes out of the bottle at minus 65 degrees
That's
F.
a thermal shock.
That's a
Bad
horrible
news.
thermal shock.
Yeah.
And I literally heard him choke over the phone.
No, that's great
and
testing.
then when he
That's
covered
product
himself,
testing,
it was
proving that if
perfect.
you took the car to Antarctica, that you could function.
Yeah, and he said, I need that pump. And I had my buddy send it to
Yeah.
him. And I mean, really, what that really is a... But so the solution was that what he was doing was he was circulating. There was like 4 gallons left in the tank at wide open because the pump ran
running full speed
all the time. Was circulating that 4 gallons like every 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And so the temperature just went, and then it finally vaporized. And when it vaporized, now there's no fuel to pump, and so it locked up.
And I'm not saying anything bad about Aeromotive
No,
at all.
no, no,
They
not
actually
at
make
all.
some really nice parts. You hold them in your
Absolutely.
hand. It's one of these things.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like ARP bolts. You hold an ARP bolt in your hand and go, wow, that's a nice part.
It's really
right?
nice. Yeah.
Right? That's a nice part.
Brought to you
it
by...
was total installer error, you know.
Right.
And I've used that example 1,000 times because it's like you can't do that. You got to put the pump in the tank.
You need to put the
And
pump in the tank
GM was
and-
much smarter than that and said, "Well, we're going to make this even better."
Right.
And this module just makes it
Yeah.
perfect.
So first, step one is to slow the pump down.
Right.
Now, the other reason that GM did it, and you'll see this on the internet, people will say, well, the only reason they did that was for emissions purposes. Well, I have a different viewpoint on emissions than most people.
Right.
I think emissions requirements are the greatest thing that's ever happened to the automotive world in the past 30 years.
Oh, okay. Okay, I like this.
So how else would we have the fantastic
Performance that we have.
ECMs, sensors, O2 full closed loop O2 capability,
Right,
all
right.
of these wonderful systems
Came from the demand
the
to
emissions
make them
requirements.
more emission efficient.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with not with
Exactly.
having good emissions? There's nothing wrong with that.
So hence why you because I was going to ask the question why you put the O2 or I mean the cats on your car.
So
you certainly didn't have to.
I didn't have to, but for me it did two things. One, it really quieted down the car without losing performance.
Okay, because Chevrolet engineered it.
They
that
engineered
way.
all that
they
stuff.
Engineered
And
it that
again, I
way.
was given some data that I was like, you got to be kidding me. I
Really?
couldn't believe the data that I was being given.
Really?
Again, I trust these guys.
like DB data.
Well, not DB data,
Flow.
horsepower data.
Horsepower data.
Real.
Yeah, cats don't really hurt
don't.
power. They don't.
No.
No.
Modern
The
supercharged cars.
The old days of pellet converters, yes, they were horrible.
Different deal.
But these are monoliths.
Correct.
Yeah.
So a whole different animal. So I mean, I love having my wife drive along with me in the car, but she never liked driving in it for a long time because she gets out and she smells like
Smells like
hydrocarbons.
gasoline.
Yeah.
Right.
That's gone. That doesn't exist any longer in the car. So
that's a
it's-
good point. Yeah.
But overall, emissions have done so much for the performance hobby that we don't even think about most of the time.
Yeah.
Because that's what's driven all these systems.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. So just finish the description of your system because so the pump is factory and you've got, let's say you've got an LS motor or a Hemi, whatever it is.
Yep.
And so to complete the system,
So
you
you
need
got
a
this
way
pump.
to control the pressure.
Right. So you got this pump, and maybe you're using one of them, maybe you're using two of them. There
Mm-hmm.
are applications where we're doing two of these things at the same time. Sure. But to be able, in the aftermarket, trying to use the OEM fuel system control module is really hard to do.
Right.
So I've got a standalone controller that can control those pumps. The engine's going to it doesn't know the difference, whether it's a full return system or whether it's a pulse width modulated returnless system. All the injector cares that it gets the right amount of fuel at the right pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
You meet those requirements, all the problems go away.
Right.
And for folks who say, well, you can't make 800 or 900 horsepower on a returnless system, please don't go tell Mopar that
because they're already
doing that on the Demon, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
750 horsepower C7 ZR1 systems are
all day long
with these things.
All day long.
It's all getting it set up correctly,
Sure.
Controlling those pumps the right way, and then those pumps will literally suck the tank dry.
Yeah. And
literally
still give you the fuel right to the very end.
When it is empty, it is empty.
There's no going.
Right. There's no trying to nurse it anymore.
Yeah, because internally it's returning a certain amount of the fuel to always make sure that the pump itself, the inlet to the pump, has always got fuel.
There's some bleed fuel that is used to shoot through nozzles. So when you shoot high stream of pressure liquid through a nozzle, it creates suction. So that suction's pulling fuel into the reservoir, into the bucket.
Right.
So it's always overflowing with fresh fuel. Even if there's that much fuel in the tank, it'll keep sucking that fuel in and overflowing it. So since there's literally suction pumps that are keeping that thing full, there's nothing in the aftermarket that's even close to what these OEM pumps can do.
Yeah.
And they're fully filtered. They have safety devices.
Oh yeah.
OE quality connections. So you're talking really
well-engineered stuff.
Nice stuff.
Install it and forget about it.
Yeah,
because you don't ever have to worry about it.
Like Steve said, the OEMs are spending more in development of these fuel pumps than most aftermarket fuel companies have in their entire budget.
Right.
And the purpose of an engineer is to do for $2 what anybody can do for $5.
Yep.
So you mentioned Rock Auto. You can buy a 650 horsepower supercharged or 750 horsepower naturally aspirated OEM fuel module, ZL1 Camaro Gen 5, for $205.
Oh, man.
All
day long.
And it will live forever.
Who replaces fuel pumps or fuel filters in their modern cars anymore?
Right. Nobody
just
does.
don't.
Yeah, you just don't.
Yeah.
Especially if you keep the tank at least half full, because even then it's not really critical. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but you're right. Yeah, it's not important now.
So let's say you've got this same pump and you run it full speed, okay, and you're making 60 psi. Take that same exact ZL1 pump and now run it on PWM, 60 psi. The injector has no idea. It doesn't know the difference.
Doesn't
right?
care.
It doesn't care. Just doing that is a 50% reduction in power of the pump.
Wow.
50% reduction in power. Because during idle and cruise, all that power just goes to heating up the fuel.
Right.
Very little fuel is going to the engine.
Yep. So all you've really done is integrated the engineering that's already there into an aftermarket application that anybody could use.
Yeah.
Because once you set it, because you just basically take it's essentially a slide adjuster.
Just a potentiometer,
A potentiometer to set your pressure, set it there, and
walk away.
You're done.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the last adjustment you'll ever have to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unless you change something in the car.
Didn't you tell me once that you were running one of those little things continuously for like years at a time in your shop?
So I have the controller that's in the car now is I actually recently put that one in, but the current version is basically the same since mid 2013. That was a hand build. That means microelectronics, building it underneath a microscope, to build it. I had that unit in the car up until very recently.
Wow.
And
so they're incredibly durable. So you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, most of the time, if something goes wrong, read the instructions. That's the most important thing.
Right.
And fortunately, with guys like Steve, their guys are very adept at having put these things in.
Right.
But in general, if you it's the don't do something stupid rule. But that goes not just for my product or
that's
anybody's product.
Yeah. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's like when something fails, the first thing I look at, people just point to the product and go, well, it failed. And it's like I've learned over the years, it's like, well, I got to look at what I did.
Right.
Usually, what the problem is it's the dad at Christmas time problem. Dad never looks at the instructions,
right?
And the swing set looks like something that came from the set of
Rube Goldberg.
Mars. Yep. And nothing works at all, and it's because they don't read the instructions.
Right, exactly.
So what's the again? I'm going to give him every opportunity to promote his company. How do people go on the web and find you?
Yeah.
What is the web address?
So, VaporWorx.
With an X.
With an X.
With an X.
With an X. Yes, Steve, it has an X.
See, Shannon Hudson, isn't it?
Was making fun of it. Yeah.
Because I was in the background.
Because you were, right here, baby. Yeah.
We're all friends. So it's VaporWorx.
Yeah, VaporWorx.com.
With an X.
and there's actually tools in there. So if you just know, oh, I got 600 horsepower of this or this, it actually has a menu to walk you through to be able to select the system that would work best for you. But as always, there's a telephone number, and you can call that up and talk to me, and I'll walk
to you. Yeah.
Well,
because I've got a buddy that's doing an LSA Chevelle, and I many years ago told him, dude, this is what you need to do. Yeah.
It's really a no-brainer for especially
really
for most folks that are going to go out and want to drive the car.
Right.
Because you never know. Like one lap again, we're in the middle of nowhere. And we thought we were going to be able to get a gas station, and we didn't. We had to go almost another 100 miles to get to a gas station. We would not have made it on a traditional fuel system that leaves an inch of fuel in the bottom of the tank. We sneaked in there and had about a half a gallon left in the tank, sweating the whole time. But it's for me, it's really been kind of a joy too, because my engineering background and all that, and it's a lot of fun to
proof
to
of
do.
concept, right?
Well, that's it.
I want to make it real clear, because we've been talking about LS motors, we've been talking about Hellcat motors. I've been using your stuff on other motors. We use it on Bob Florian's big Boss Kazi. Boss 9 motor with a Borla 8 stack on it.
Anything.
So it doesn't, just so there's no misunderstanding, it's not just, you don't have to have a new LS motor or a new Gen 3 Hemi. No. This can be anything with injectors.
Sure.
And you've now taken the fuel delivery out of the worry, because you're using an OEM quality pump, and you're making it easier, because like I said, one line. It's not a wiring nightmare. You could put the EFI motor in. You could put your thing in without even trying. How many wire? And he'll even work with you, like, where are you going to put the module? Okay, I'll make you a wiring harness that's X amount of feet long. So it's already in your ballpark for your engine. So it's the reason I'm excited to talk about this, for him to come on and talk about it, is it was a revelation for me at the shop. It really, really was. It simplified, added way more reliability, and it allowed me to make things look better.
Sure.
And more straightforward. I go buy that pump, bring it. It was like just a light bulb turn on moment. So I'm excited that you guys can go check it out. If you're building a fuel injected motor, you should definitely take a few minutes and go learn about this stuff. It's really cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So
it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And it really fits in with what you're doing with the Camaro, because you're adding to the durability of it and everything else.
I didn't trust driving the cars. now I don't even think. That's actually
don't even think about
it's actually the biggest problem for most folks. They forget to put fuel in it, because they've forgotten the thing does what it's supposed to do.
Right.
But,
which is the simplest thing in the world, but you'd be surprised how often it happens. Yeah. Well, listen, we could probably talk about this for another hour, but we've run out of time. So thanks for coming, man. We had a great time. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me here today, guys.
Maybe we'll have you back to tell some great stories, because I'm sure there's some crazy, one-lap stories, right?
Oh, there's plenty.
But we'll save that for another time. Thanks for watching. We've had a great time doing all this. Again, thank you to ARP-bolts.com, our main sponsor. And keep watching, and we'll keep telling you stories.